Ever really stop to think about what's going on inside the mind of an AI? It can feel like this incredibly complex, almost magical black box. Well, today we're going to demystify large language models, and we're going to do it with a surprisingly simple analogy, just making a good old cup of tea.
You know the drill, right? You type a question, you hit enter, and boom, seconds later, an answer appears that's weirdly coherent, sometimes brilliant. It feels like magic. But what is actually happening behind that screen? What's the secret recipe to this digital brew?
Yep, you heard me. It's just like brewing a cup of tea. The entire complicated process, from building a massive AI model from scratch to it answering your very specific question, it all maps perfectly to making and brewing tea. It might sound a little out there, but stick with me and you'll see it makes perfect sense. Okay, so every great cup of tea has to start with an order. So let's begin right there with you, the customer.
Think about it. When you type out a prompt, whether you're asking for a sonnet about squirrels, a business email, or a chunk of Python code, you are literally placing a super specific order. You're telling the AI barista, hey, this is exactly the kind of tea I'm in the mood for. And just like at a coffee shop, the more detailed your order, the better that final brew is going to be.
All right, now for the fun part. Let's step behind the counter and see how our AI barista actually puts your drink together. In the tech world, this is called the inference process. But for us, we're just brewing the tea. You can break this whole brewing process down into 5 main steps. It all kicks off with your order, right? Your prompt. Then, the AI steeps the tea bag to pull out the main ideas. It stirs the pot to figure out how all the words and concepts connect. Then it does a little taste test to decide what comes next. And finally, it pours the finished cup. Your answer.
So let's connect the analogy directly to the tech, because this is where it gets really cool. When you stir tea, you're blending the flavors. In the AI, something called attention layers do the same thing. They stir the words from your prompt to figure out which ones are most important to each other. Then comes the tasting. The AI calculates the probability for every possible next word, basically asking itself, what flavor should come next? It picks the most likely one, adds it to the sentence, and then repeats that whole taste and add cycle, building your answer one word at a time.
Okay, so that's how the tea gets brewed. But where did the tea bag come from in the first place? This is a really important question. It brings us to the training process, which happens just one time, way before you ever think about asking a question.
Making the model is like being a master tea blender. First, you have to go out and gather your ingredients from all over the world. In this case, just massive, unbelievable amounts of data from the internet, from books, from code. Then you've got to wash and sort it all, keeping only the highest quality stuff. After that, you create your signature blend, mixing it all together, and finally you roll it all up and seal it tight into a tea bag. That finished, sealed tea bag, that is the AI model.
Now, what's so incredibly important to get from this slide is that very last step, seal the bag. See, once the model is trained, its weights are frozen. It becomes static. It's got all the knowledge, all the patterns from its training data packed inside, but it can't just go back to the garden and learn more on its own. The flavor is officially locked in.
Of course, just like any good tea shop has more than one blend on the shelf, the world of AI has tons of different models, and each one has its own unique character, its own flavor.
The size of a model, which we measure in parameters, is a lot like the quality of the tea leaves. A huge, powerful model like GPT-4, well, that's like a high-grade Darjeeling. It's going to give you a rich, complex, and really nuanced answer. A smaller model is more like a budget blend. It still gets the job done, for sure, but the flavor is going to be a little simpler, a bit more direct.
And this is just a brilliant way to picture the idea of a context window. It's just the size of the cup. A tiny espresso cup can't hold much of your conversation's history, but a giant teapot, that can keep the entire conversation in mind, which leads to much more coherent and thoughtful long-form answers.
This is such a great way to think about what we call fine-tuning. A base model is kind of like a plain black tea, but a chat model, something like ChatGPT, has been fine-tuned. It's like a tea that comes with the milk and sugar already mixed in to make it more polite, more helpful, and safer right out of the box. So all of this brings us to what is arguably the single most important rule to remember about how all these models work. And it's the difference between a stale brew and a fresh one.
This is it. This is the whole game. The model can only brew answers based on the data it was trained on, those leaves that were sealed inside the bag months or even years ago. Its knowledge has a cutoff date. It can't spontaneously learn about today's news just because you asked it.
And that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? If the tea bag is sealed and the knowledge is old, how in the world can it tell you about something that happened yesterday? Well, the answer is by using tools. A standard model with no tools just gives you that standard brew. It's using only what's inside its own bag, and that info might be stale. But a model that has access to tools, it can pause the brewing, do a quick web search, and then add that fresh information into the pot. It's exactly like squeezing a fresh wedge of lemon into your cup to give it that bright, up-to-the-minute kick.
So let's just recap the key takeaways here. First, training. This is when all the data gets blended into that sealed tea bag we call the model. Second, inference. This is when your prompt brews an answer using only what's inside that bag. And third, freshness. Remember, the tea bag is sealed. To get new, fresh info, the model needs to add a fresh ingredient, like a web search. The next time you chat with an AI, just remember, you're the one placing the order. So what kind of intelligence will you ask it to brew for you?